In this video, we shall be taking you to Ethiopia to examine the life of its very first president, Mengistu Haile-Mariam, also known as the Butcher of Addis Ababa. Mengistu is an Ethiopian soldier and politician who was the first president of Ethiopia from 1977 to 1991 and General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Ethiopia from 1984 to 1991. He was the chairman of the Derg, the socialist military junta that governed Ethiopia from 1977 to 1987, and the president of the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, or PDRE, from 1987 to 1991. Before we dive into the story of Mengistu, if you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of our videos. Mengistu's early life and background. Mengistu Haile-Mariam Ayana was born on 21st May 1937 in Wolayita zone of southern Ethiopia, or Kaffa province. Mengistu's father was a soldier and his mother was a servant. His mother died during childbirth when Mengistu was only 8 years old. After the death of his mother, Mengistu and his two siblings went to live with their grandmother for a few years. He then came back to live with his father and soon after joined the military at a very young age. Mengistu's father was very proud of his son's military achievements, though some people believe that Ethiopian popular account that states that his family was far from proud of his political accomplishments. His military life. Mengistu trained as an army officer in Holeta, Ethiopia and United States. Mengistu's father was a soldier and his mother was a servant. Mengistu followed his father and joined the army, where he attracted the attention of the region-born General Ahmad Andom, who raised him to the rank of sergeant and assigned his duties as an errand boy in his office. Mengistu graduated from the Holeta Military Academy, one of the two important military academies of Ethiopia. General Aman then became his mentor, and when the general was assigned to the command of the 3rd Division, he took Mengistu along with him to Harar, and later was assigned as ordnance officer in the 3rd Division. He was subsequently sent to the US for the first time in 1964 to the Savannah Army Depot in Illinois for an ordnance testing course. A few years before his second departure for training to the US, he was in conflict with the 3rd Division commander, General Haile-Mariam, whose policy of strict discipline and order did not sit well with Mengistu. At the time, the Ordnance Group was offered military technical training support in the US. Despite his disapproval of Mengistu's insubordination and disrespect, the general was obliged to release him, and Mengistu went for an 18-month training program at the Aberdeen Province ground in Maryland, United States. He also took some night classes at the University of Maryland, making him fluent in English, and then he returned for a third time in 1970, and this time as a student at the Combined Arms Center in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Returning after his training, he was expected to command the Ordnance Subdivision in Harar. Years later, Mengistu would murder General Haile-Mariam along with 60 ministers and generals. The rise of the Derg. Emperor Haile Selassie's government, having lost the confidence of the Ethiopian public following a drought and crop failures in Wello province, was overthrown in the Ethiopian Revolution of 1974. As a result, power came into the hands of a committee of low-ranking officers and enlisted soldiers led by Antafu Abate, which came to be known as the Derg. Mengistu was originally one of the lesser members, officially sent to represent the 3rd Division because his commander, General Nega Tegnen, considered him a troublemaker and wanted to get rid of him. But between July and September 1974, Mengistu was a member of the Derg, though he preferred to act through more public members like his former mentor, General Aman Andom, and later Tafari Benti. Mengistu and Antafu Abate were the deputy chairman of Derg from March 1975 to February 1977. Haile Selassie was strangled in 1975. It is rumored that Mengistu smothered the emperor using a pillowcase, but Mengistu has denied these rumors. Though several groups were involved in the overthrow, the Derg succeeded to power. There is no doubt that the Derg under Mengistu's leadership ordered the execution without trial of 61 ex-officials of the imperial government on 23 November 1974, and later of numerous other former nobles and officials, including the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Abuna Theophilus, in 1974. Mengistu himself has acknowledged that the Derg ordered these deaths, but refuses to accept personal responsibility. Members of the Derg have contradicted him in interviews given from prison, saying he conspired and was in full agreement with their decisions. Political conflicts. Resistance against the Derg ensued, led primarily by the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party. Mengistu cracked down on the EPRP and other revolutionary student organizations in what would be called the Red Terror. The Derg subsequently turned against the Socialist Students Movement, Mason, a major supporter against the EPRP in what would be called the White Terror. The EPRP's efforts to discredit and undermine the Derg and its Mason collaborators escalated in the fall of 1976. It targeted public buildings and other symbols of state authority for bombings and assassinated numerous Ebiot, Sedet, and Mason members, as well as public officials at all levels. The Derg, which countered with its own counter-terrorism campaign, labeled the EPRP's tactics the White Terror. In a public speech in 1976, Mengistu shouted, "Death to counter-revolutionaries, death to the EPRP," and then produced 3 bottles filled with red liquid that symbolized the blood of the imperialists and the counter-revolutionaries and smashed them to the ground to show what the revolution would do to its enemies. Thousands of young men and women turned up dead in the streets of the capital and other cities in the following 2 years. They were symmetrically murdered, mainly by the militia attached to the Kibels, the neighborhood watch committees which served during Mengistu's reign as the lowest level local government and security surveillance units. Families had to pay the Kibels a tax known as the wasted bullet to obtain the bodies of their loved ones. In May 1977, the Swedish General Secretary of the Save the Children Fund stated that 1,000 children have been killed and their bodies are left in the streets and are being eaten by wild hyenas. Military gains made by the monarchist Ethiopian Democratic Union in Bengmeda were rolled back when the party split, just as it was on the verge of capturing the old capital of Gondar. The army of the Somali Democratic Republic invaded Ethiopia, having overrun the Ogaden region, and then was on the verge of capturing Harar and Dawa when Somalia's erstwhile allies, the Soviets and the Cubans, launched an unprecedented arms and personnel airlift to come to Ethiopia's rescue. The Derg government turned back to the Somali invasion and made deep strides against the Eritrean secessionists and the TPLF as well. By the end of the 70s, Mengistu presided over the second largest army in all of sub-Saharan Africa, as well as a formidable air force and navy. In the 1970s, Mengistu embraced the philosophy of Marxism and Leninism, which was increasingly popular amongst many nationalists and revolutionaries throughout Africa and much of the Third World at the time. In the mid-1970s, under Mengistu's leadership, the Derg reign began an aggressive program of changing Ethiopia's system from a mixed feudal-capitalist emergent economy to an Eastern Bloc-style command economy. Shortly after coming to power, all rural land was nationalized, stripping the Ethiopian church, the imperial family, and the nobility of all their sizable estates and the bulk of their wealth. During this same period, all foreign-owned and locally owned companies were nationalized without compensation in an effort to redistribute the country's wealth. All this nationalized property was brought under the administration of large bureaucracies set up to administer them. Farmers who had once worked on land owned by abstinence landlords were now compelled to join collective farms. All agricultural products were no longer to be offered on the free market, but were to be controlled and distributed by the government. Despite progressive agricultural reforms under the Derg, agricultural output suffered due to civil war, drought, and misguided economic policies. There was also a famine in 1984, which was the 10th anniversary of the Derg. The Soviets hailed Ethiopia for its supposed similar cultural and historical parallels, but in the 1980s, when Ethiopia plunged into greater turmoil and the Soviet system was collapsing, interestingly, Russian commentators turned scornful of the Ethiopian regime. During the Ogaden War, learning that after the fall of the Jijiga, 2 units of the Somali army on September 2, 1977, Ethiopian units had started to mutiny, Mengistu flew to the front and took direct control. The Somalis broke through Ethiopian lines, recapturing Jijiga on 12 September and managing to overrun Ethiopian positions past the Mada Pass. In early 1984, under Mengistu's direction, the Marxist-Leninist Workers' Party of Ethiopia (WPE) was founded as the country's ruling party, with Mengistu as General Secretary. On 10 September 1987, a new Soviet-style constitution was adopted, and the country was renamed the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Mengistu became president with sweeping executive legislative powers, and due to the doctrine of democratic centralism, he was effectively a dictator. On 16 May 1989, while Mengistu was out of the country for a 4-day state visit to East Germany, senior military officials attempted a coup, and the Minister of Defense Haile-Mariam was killed. Mengistu returned within 24 hours, and 9 generals, including the Air Force commander and the Army Chief of Staff, died as the coup was crushed. He and the other surviving members of the Derg all retired from the military, but even as civilians, they dominated the Pochipuro of the WPE. In the late 1980s, some Western critics of Mengistu, including Michael Jones of the Heritage Foundation, charged that Mengistu's economic, military, and political policies, along with the Soviet Union's support for Mengistu, were key contributing factors to the mid-1980s Ethiopian famine, which ultimately took over 500,000 lives. By 1990, the Soviet Union had ended its support for Mengistu's regime, and in a bid to buy more time, Mengistu renounced communism, beginning taking steps towards opening the economy. However, the liberalization of Ethiopia's market lasted only 1 year under the DPRE. In May 1991, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front (EPRDF) forces advanced on Addis Ababa from all sides, and Mengistu fled the country with 50 family and Derg members. He was granted asylum in Zimbabwe as an official guest of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe. Mengistu left behind almost the entire membership of the original Derg and the WPE leadership. The regime only survived without him for another week before the EPRDF streamed into the capital, precluding the previous leadership's escape. Almost all were promptly arrested and put on trial about the assumption of power by the EPRDF. Mengistu has claimed that the takeover of this country resulted from the policies of Mikhail Gorbachev, who in his view allowed the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the termination of its aid to Ethiopia. Mengistu was charged by the Ethiopian government led by Meles Zenawi in absentia of several heinous crimes with evidence of 8,000 pages long. The long trial, which started in 1994 with a charge sheet and evidence list of 8,000 pages long, included signed execution orders, videos of torture sessions, and personal testimony. The court found Mengistu guilty as charged in absentia on 12 December 2006 and imposed a life sentence in January 2007, but it was overturned to a death sentence in 2008 by the Ethiopian High Court after an appeal. Amnesty International estimates that between 500,000 to 2 million people were killed during the Red Terror of 1977 to 1978. 23 of his most senior aides also received death sentences that were commuted on 1 June 2011. 16 former Mengistu officials released from prison on parole due to their old age and good behavior, but Mengistu's sentence remained unchanged. Contrary to popular Ethiopian opinions, Mengistu's family was very proud of his military and political achievements. There you have it, explorers. That was the brief history of Ethiopia's first president, Mengistu Haile-Mariam. Thanks for watching this video, and if you did enjoy this video, do well to give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe and share with your friends.